John Hooper Harvey was a British architectural historian who specialised in writing on English Gothic architecture and architects. Paul Crossley has described him as the most prolific and arguably the most influential writer on Gothic architecture in the post-war years. He made extensive use of archival sources, and is particularly remembered for having and his biographical dictionary of English Medieval Architects helped dispel the myth that the architects of medieval buildings were anonymous figures of whom little could be discovered. He also published more generally on England in the later Middle Ages, and was a pioneer in the field of garden history. Early life. Harvey was born in London, the only child of William Harvey, architect, and his wife Alice Neaqt Wilcox. He was educated at St John's School, Leatherhead, after which, in 1928, he joined the architectural practice of Sir Herbert Baker. While in Baker's office he studied architecture at the Regent Street Polytechnic. From 1933 to 1935 he travelled with his father in Palestine, helping survey ancient buildings. In 1936 he took a job with the Office of Works, Politics and World War II. In 1930 Harvey joined the far-right and anti-Semitic Imperial Fascist League, and for a while was active in a subgroup known as the Nordics. He had to curtail his activities when he joined the Office of Works, but he continued to be peripherally involved and to pay his subscriptions to the IFL until 1940. On the outbreak of World War II he was placed on a suspect list by MI5. In 1942 he was sentenced to 12 months imprisonment for failing to submit to a medical examination, but he subsequently secured his release and was placed on the register of conscientious objectors. He was not re-employed by the Office of Works, and instead joined his father in identifying buildings of historic interest in danger of destruction from enemy action. Post-war career. In 1947 Harvey was appointed consultant architect at Winchester College, a post he retained until 1964. In 1950 he became lecturer in conservation at the Bartlett School of Architecture at University College London, where he remained until 1959. These were part-time posts, allowing him to devote much of his time to writing. He had begun to publish articles on medieval architecture in 1936, and his prodigious stream of publications, including numerous books, continued in the post-war years. His magisterial biographical dictionary of English Medieval Architects, the first edition of which appeared in 1954, contained 1,300 entries, and has been described as a feat of titanic proportions. A central theme of many of his publications was the artistic importance of England and of the English national style in the 14th and 15th centuries. More particularly, he regarded Perpendicular architecture as the quintessential national style, and a manifestation of the English national character. Paul Crossley considers that his neo-romantic sensibilities propelled him beyond romanticism into real historical understanding, inspired by a tenacious curiosity for fact, and based on a phenomenal learning. Elsewhere, Crossley compares Harvey's Gothic world with Nicolaus Pevsner's outline of European architecture and finds that the contrast could not have been more telling. Harvey patiently accumulating masses of detailed research to fill his survey with lists of empirical data. Pevsner subsuming detail into the broad sweep of a pan-European synthesis. In 1963 Harvey moved to York, where he was employed until 1970 as an investigator and editor by the Royal Commission on the Historical Monuments of England. In 1975 he moved to Frome, Somerset. It was from this time that he became increasingly interested in garden history, and a prominent figure in the Garden History Society. Prejudices. Harvey's conviction of the importance and uniqueness of the English Gothic style meant that in much of his writing, in Crossley's view, his nationalism continued to distort his judgment. Thus, in his well-received study of the Perpendicular style, he refused to acknowledge the influence of the French Renaissance style on English Perpendicular architecture, and he excluded Tudor Perpendicular buildings from consideration on the grounds that the distinctive nationalism of the English style had been compromised in this period by the inclusion of minor motifs of exotic and foreign origin. He successfully distanced himself in the post-war period from his earlier political affiliations, but a short passage in his successful and frequently reprinted book The Plantagenets, in which he gave credence to stories of Jewish ritual murder and praised the statesmanship of Edward I in expelling the Jews from England in 1290, continued to cause offense. He refused to amend the passage, and the publishers eventually allowed the book to go out of print in the mid-1980s. Institutional affiliations and awards. Harvey was elected a Fellow of the Society of Genealogists in 1939, the Royal Society of Literature in 1945, and the Society of Antiquaries of London in 1949. He served on the Council of the Ancient Monuments Society for some 30 years from 1960, and as President of the Garden History Society from 1982 to 1985. The University of York awarded him an honorary doctorate in 1976, for his 70th birthday in 1981, rather than presenting him with the customary scholarly Festschrift. Harvey's friends and admirers helped fund the second edition of his English Medieval Architects. Personal life. Harvey married Cordelia Story in 1934. They had two sons, Richard and Charles, and one daughter, Eleanor. Principal publications: The Heritage of Britain, Henry Yeaverley, The Life of an English Architect, Gothic England, A Survey of National Culture, 1300 to 1550, The Plantagenets, 1154 to 1485. Tudor Architecture, The Gothic World, The English Cathedrals, English Cathedrals, A Reader's Guide, English Medieval Architects, a biographical dictionary down to 1550, with contributions by Arthur Oswald. Itineraries William Worcester, The Master Builders, Architecture in the Middle Ages, The Medieval Architect, Conservation of Buildings, Early Gardening Catalogues, Cathedrals of England and Wales, Sources for the History of Houses, Early Nurserymen, Medieval Craftsmen, The Black Prince and His Age, The Perpendicular Style, 1330 to 1485, Medieval Gardens, The Availability of Hardy Plants of the Late 18th Century. Fuller lists of Harvey's many publications appear in Colchester, L.S. Bibliography of John H. Harvey. Transactions of the Ancient Monuments Society, NS 25-47-52. Colchester, L.S. Bibliography of John H. Harvey. Editions. Transactions of the Ancient Monuments Society, NS 26-249-52. Published writings by John Hooper Harvey on garden history and related topics. Garden History, 26-102-5. 1998. Bibliography. Brock, David. Harvey, John Hooper. Oxford Dictionary of National Biography. Oxford University Press. DOI. 10.1093. Ref. ODNB. 68424. Crossley, Paul. Anglia Perdita, English Medieval Architecture and Neo-Romanticism. In L'Engle, Susan. Guest, Gerald B. Tributes to Jonathan J. G. Alexander. The Making and Meaning of Illuminated Medieval and Amp Renaissance Manuscripts, Art and Amp Architecture. London, Harvey Miller, pp. 471-85. ISBN 9781872501475. Macklin, Graham. The Two Lives of John Hooper Harvey. Patterns of Prejudice, 42-167-90. DOI 10.10800313220801996030. Marks, Richard. The Englishness of English Gothic Art. Studies in the Art and Imagery of the Middle Ages. London, Pindar Press. pp. 1-32. ISBN 9781904597384.